echoes in the dark. Rain drummed against the old windows of the dilapidated mansion, each drop a reminder of the storm brewing outside. Sarah shivered, pulling her cardigan tighter around her. She cursed herself for agreeing to house-sit for her uncle. The mansion, a crumbling relic of a bygone era, was miles away from civilization, perched on a lonely hill. The electricity had gone out hours ago, leaving her with only the dim glow of a few candles. Shadows danced eerily on the walls, creating grotesque shapes that seemed almost alive. The wind howled, seeping through the cracks in the walls, carrying with it an unsettling whisper. Sarah tried to focus on her book, but the words blurred as her mind kept drifting to the mansion's history. Her uncle had bought it at an auction, charmed by its old-world elegance and oblivious to the dark stories that clung to it like cobwebs. Tales of disappearances and madness, of a family that had vanished without a trace, leaving behind only their screams that, some said, still echoed through the halls. A creaking noise snapped Sarah out of her thoughts. She looked up, heart pounding. The sound had come from upstairs. She held her breath, listening. Silence. Then, just as she was about to convince herself it was nothing, the creak came again, followed by a soft thud. She stood up, her legs trembling. "It's just an old house," she whispered to herself. Old houses make noises. But deep down, she didn't believe it. She grabbed a candle and made her way to the grand staircase. The flickering light cast long, sinister shadows on the walls. As she climbed the stairs, each step seemed to groan under her weight, amplifying the sense of dread that had settled over her. At the top, she paused, straining her ears. The sound had come from the left, down the hallway that led to the master bedroom. "Hello?" she called out, her voice trembling. No answer. She forced herself to walk down the hallway, the candle casting eerie light on the portraits that lined the walls. The eyes of long-dead relatives seemed to follow her, their expressions twisted by the shadows. She reached the master bedroom and hesitated. The door was slightly ajar, a sliver of darkness beckoning her. Taking a deep breath, she pushed it open. The room was cold, much colder than the rest of the house. The wind had picked up outside, and the window rattled in its frame. Sarah stepped inside, the floorboards creaking under her feet. She held the candle high, its feeble light barely penetrating the gloom. The room was empty. She let out a sigh of relief, feeling foolish for letting her imagination get the better of her. Then she saw it. In the corner of the room, where the shadows were darkest, something moved. She froze, her heart racing. The figure was hunched over, its features obscured by the darkness. She could hear it breathing, a ragged, uneven sound that sent chills down her spine. "Who's there?" she demanded, her voice stronger than she felt. The figure didn't respond. Instead, it began to straighten up, unfolding itself from the shadows. Sarah took a step back, her mind screaming at her to run, but her feet felt glued to the floor. The figure stepped into the candlelight, revealing a gaunt, ghostly face with hollow eyes that seemed to stare right through her. Its mouth opened, and a sound escaped, a low, mournful wail that echoed in the room. Sarah turned and fled, the candle blowing out in her haste. She stumbled down the hallway, her only thought to get out of the house. She reached the stairs and half ran, half fell down them, her breath coming in panicked gasps. She reached the front door and yanked it open, the storm outside a welcome relief from the oppressive darkness inside. She ran out into the rain, not caring about the mud that splashed up her legs or the branches that whipped her face. She kept running until she reached the road, her lungs burning and her legs aching. She looked back, the mansion a dark silhouette against the stormy sky. The figure stood in the doorway, watching her with those hollow eyes. Sarah didn't stop running until she reached the nearest house, pounding on the door until it opened. The kind, elderly couple inside took her in, listened to her frantic story, and called the police. When the police arrived at the mansion, they found nothing. No sign of the figure, no evidence of anyone else being in the house. They dismissed her story as the product of an overactive imagination and the eerie atmosphere of an old, isolated house. But Sarah knew what she had seen. She knew the mansion was haunted by something far more sinister than just old stories. She never returned to her uncle's house, and he eventually sold it, unable to ignore the chill that had settled over it. Years later, Sarah heard that the new owners had also fled, driven out by strange noises and sightings. The mansion still stands, a decaying monument to its dark past, its empty halls echoing with the whispers of those who vanished within its walls. And on stormy nights, if you listen closely, you can hear the wail of the ghost that haunts it, a mournful sound that chills the blood and reminds you that some places are better left alone.